Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you provide, dive right in, and pull out the key insights. No fluff, just the stuff you need to know.
Exactly. And today we're looking at a really fascinating period, Dar al-Islam, from about 1200 to 1450.
Right, a huge interconnected world shaped by Islamic culture, Islamic rule often. You've given us some great material here.
Yeah, and our mission really is to understand the big shifts, like how beliefs affected society, how new Islamic states rose up, and all the intellectual progress happening then.
We want you to feel like you can really get a handle on this period, without getting lost in the weeds.
So starting with beliefs then, because they weren't just ideas floating around, they were fundamental.
Definitely shaping society. And it wasn't just Islam in isolation.
Not at all. You had this constant interaction, really, between Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all Abrahamic faiths.
Right. And to get the dynamics, we need to see how they actually played out in people's lives, not just the core beliefs.
Exactly. Their real-world impact.
Okay, so let's paint a quick picture, a quick refresher on each, maybe focusing on what's relevant for this 1200, 1450 time frame. Judaism first.
Sure. Judaism, the oldest, starts in the Middle East. Monotheistic, one God. And that's crucial because it sort of provided the soil for the other two to grow from.
The foundation. Makes sense. And Christianity emerges from that context.
Precisely. Founded by Jesus, a Jewish figure, his message was about salvation, grace. It started small within the Roman Empire, but then Emperor Constantine adopts it.
And that changed everything, didn't it? Huge societal influence.
Massive. And it developed this whole structure, popes, bishops. That organization gave it real strength across Europe, parts of North Africa, too.
A major religious and political force. Okay, then fast forward a few centuries, Islam arrives.
Right. Founded by Prophet Muhammad, 7th century, Arabian Peninsula. Muslims see him as the final prophet, following figures revered in Judaism and Christianity.
And the path to salvation involves righteous living.
Yeah, things like almsgiving, charity, prayer, fasting.
Yeah.
And after Muhammad died in 632, Islam spread incredibly fast. That's how Dar al-Islam, this huge sphere of Islamic influence, came about. It stretched across so much of Afro-Eurasia.
Now, something interesting in the sources, this link between Prophet Muhammad being a merchant and maybe why early Islamic states did well economically, especially compared to some early Christian views on making money.
Yeah, that's a really sharp point. Muhammad's background in trade, plus Islamic principles that didn't really frown on commerce like some early Christian thought did, well, it likely helped foster a more trade-friendly environment.
Which would be vital for those long-distance networks.
Absolutely crucial for connecting that vast area.
Okay, beliefs are foundational. Got it. Let's switch gears to politics. The sources talk about new Islamic states rising as the Abbasid Caliphate, a big early empire, kind of loses its grip. What's happening there?
So the Islamic faith wasn't just spiritual, it helped build empires, too. The Abbasids, they came to power back in the 8th century, based in Baghdad.
Ah, the golden age of Islam, right. Lots of learning, culture.
Exactly that period. Huge advancements. But by 1200, maybe a bit before, their actual central control over all that territory was, well, weakening quite a bit.
And their rise wasn't exactly peaceful either, was it?
Yeah.
I remember reading they overthrew the Umayyads before them.
That's right, yeah. A pretty violent takeover in the 8th century. So you already have this history of power shifting within the Islamic world. That kind of sets the scene for what happens later in our period.
So Abbasids fading.
Yeah.
And then we see this really key shift. New empires popping up, often led by Turkic peoples, not Arabs anymore. Why Turks?
This is super important. For a long time after Muhammad, the main political, cultural leaders were Arab. But around the 11th, 12th centuries, you start seeing powerful states led by different Turkic groups. These groups had often moved into the region or, significantly, were brought in as soldiers.
Okay, and the sources give us three main examples to look at. The Seljuk Empire, the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt, and the Delhi Sultanate in South Asia. Let's break those down. Seljuks first.
Okay. The Seljuks. They came onto the scene in the 11th century from Central Asia. They were originally pastoral Turkic people. And here's the interesting part. The Abbasids actually brought them in as a military force.
Ah, hired muscle, basically.
Kind of, yeah. But over time, certainly by the 1200s, that military strength turned into real political power. They started overshadowing the Abbasid caliphs. The caliphs still had symbolic religious authority,
But the guys with the swords were really calling the shots.
Pretty much. The power on the ground shifted to the Turkic military leaders.
A familiar story. Okay, what about the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt? That sounds intriguing.
Right, so before the Mamluks, Egypt was ruled by the Ayyubid Sultanate, founded by the famous Saladin. To strengthen his army, Saladin used enslaved warriors, mostly Turkic, called Mamluks.
Enslaved warrior.
Yeah, highly trained. After Saladin died, his successors weren't quite as competent, and this created a power vacuum. The Mamluks, being organized and skilled, seized their chance and took over, establishing their own sultanate.
Wow. So the military force, originally slaves, became the rulers, traumatic. And the third one, the Delhi Sultanate in South Asia.
The Delhi Sultanate came about through invasions by various Turkic groups into the Indian subcontinent. They established Muslim rule over a huge, diverse Indian population, and that lasted for about 300 years. It was a major expansion of Islamic political power into South Asia.
So a big shift from Arab to Turkic leadership.
Yeah.
But the sources also say there were continuities, things that stayed the same from the earlier Arab empires, like what?
Yeah, that's important. Even with different ethnic groups in charge, these new Turkic empires kept some key structures. The military still played a really central role in running the state and administration.
Okay.
And they also continued to use Sharia law, that's the legal code based on the Quran, as the foundation for government and justice. So new faces at the top, yes, but some core principles of Islamic rule carried on.
Got it. Transformation, but also continuity.
Okay.
Let's talk about how Islam itself kept spreading across Afro-Eurasia during 1200 to 1450. It wasn't just armies conquering territory, right?
Definitely not. Military expansion was one way, sure, like we saw with the Delhi Sultanate, but Islam spread in other major ways too.
Like through trade, the merchants.
Exactly. Having Muslim-ruled areas across North Africa, the Middle East, that really boosted trade networks. They were extensive, vibrant, and these routes carried they carried people, ideas, and religion.
So trade helped spread the faith.
Yeah, for instance, look at the Empire of Mali in West Africa. Increased contact with the wider Dar al-Islam through trade was a big factor in its gradual conversion to Islam. Being part of that network had its advantages, you know?
Economic benefits could encourage adopting the faith. Makes sense. And the third way mentioned was missionaries, especially the Sufis. Who were they?
Sufism was a newer form of Islam back then, more mystical. It really emphasized a personal, direct experience of God, often through specific spiritual practices, devotional poetry, that sort of thing.
And how was that viewed by the more traditional scholars?
Well, sometimes with a bit of skepticism. The established scholarly class occasionally found Sufism maybe lacking in strict theological rigor.
But they were still effective at spreading Islam.
Oh, very. Because that focus on personal experience, maybe a less rigid approach, made Islam feel more accessible, more appealing to ordinary people in different cultures. Sufi missionaries often traveled widely. They connected with local traditions.
Which helped bridge the gap.
Exactly, made it resonate. So they played a huge role in Islam's continued spread geographically.
Right, a more adaptable approach. Okay, now let's shift to something really compelling. The intellectual explosion happening in Dar al-Islam during this time, the innovations, the knowledge transfer. It's pretty remarkable stuff in the sources.
It really was an incredible period for intellectual life. Across the board, scholars were making amazing strides. Where should we start? Mathematics.
Yeah, let's do math. We have Nasir al-Din al-Tusi mentioned. What did he do?
Al-Tusi, a 13th century Persian scholar, just brilliant. He made huge contributions to trigonometry. He came up with the law of sines for spherical triangles, which sounds technical, but it was massive for astronomy, navigation, anything needing precise calculation on a sphere.
Some practical applications, too.
Definitely. It really laid groundwork for modern trig. Plus, he was crucial in preserving and building on ancient Greek math knowledge. His translations, his own works, like the Treatise on the Quadrilateral, were super influential, not just in the Islamic world, but eventually in Europe, too.
Innovating and preserving. Powerful stuff. What about literature? There's Aisha al-Baunia.
Ah, yes, Aisha al-Baunia, a Sufi poet, a scholar from Damascus, living in the 15th into the early 16th century. She's really significant because she was one of the few Muslim women of that era known to have written so much in Arabic about Sufi ideas, theology, devotion.
That's fantastic.
Her most famous work, something like Clear Inspiration on the Praise of the Trusted One, is this beautiful, deep, poetic work praising Prophet Muhammad. It really shows the literary sophistication and spiritual depth within Sufism.
So important to highlight women's intellectual contributions. Okay, medicine. Ibn Sina comes up. Avicenna in the West.
Yeah.
Almost legendary.
Absolutely legendary. Now, he lived a bit earlier, 10th, 11th century, but his book, The Canon of Medicine, was the standard medical text throughout our 1200-1450 period, and way beyond.
Still massively influential then.
Hugely. It was this enormous encyclopedia. It pulled together medical knowledge from the Greeks, from India, from Islamic scholars, and organized it all systematically. Diagnosis, treatment, drugs, surgery, everything. It was the go-to medical book in the Islamic world and in Europe for centuries. Its clarity, its organization made it last.
A cornerstone, really.
Yeah.
The sources also stress how Muslim scholars saved and built on Greek philosophy, moral, natural philosophy. People like Averroes and Avicenna again.
Yes, absolutely a critical role. Thinkers like Averroes or Ibn Rushd and Avicenna, they didn't just save the works of Aristotle, Plato, and others. They translated them, studied them intensely, and wrote detailed commentaries, adding their own insights on ethics, logic, science.
So they weren't just librarians, they were active contributors.
Exactly. And then those commentaries were translated into Latin, and they became fundamental texts in European universities. They were a vital bridge carrying classical knowledge, sparking new thought, which eventually fed into the European Renaissance.
And you can't talk about preserving knowledge without mentioning the House of Wisdom in Baghdad.
Oh, definitely. The House of Wisdom, established earlier during that Abbasid Golden Age, was an amazing institution. A massive translation center, Greek, Persian, Indian texts pouring in, all translated into Arabic.
Making knowledge accessible.
Right. And it became this hub for new discoveries, too, in astronomy, math, medicine, philosophy. Even though its peak might have been before 1200, the foundations it laid were crucial for all the learning that followed across Darul al-Islam. And its legacy eventually reached Europe through later translations.
Wow. Okay, one more key area the sources mentioned.
Yeah.
The exchanges happening in Spain, Al-Andalus.
Right. Muslim-ruled Spain, Al-Andalus, was another incredible hotspot for learning and cultural mixing for centuries. Cities like Cordoba were major intellectual centers.
With scholars from different backgrounds working together.
Exactly. You had Muslim, Christian, and Jewish scholars collaborating, translating classical texts into Arabic, Latin, Hebrew. This led to breakthroughs in medicine, astronomy, philosophy, even architecture. And crucially, as Christian kingdoms reconquered Spain, the Reconquista, that knowledge, those texts, flowed north into the rest of Europe.
Fueling the Renaissance again.
Playing a really vital role, Al-Andalus was this crucial meeting point, a place where knowledge crossed cultural and religious lines.
It's just amazing how interconnected it all was, the flow of ideas.
It really is. This whole period, 1200 to 1450 in Dar al-Islam, you see these shifts in power, faith spreading, but also this incredible intellectual energy that really left a mark on the world.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive, we've touched on how beliefs shaped things, the rise of new Turkic powers, the different ways Islam spread, and this flourishing intellectual scene transferring knowledge all over.
Yeah, we've seen how these different threads, religion, politics, trade, ideas, were all tangled together, shaping this really pivotal era.
And hopefully for you listening, this gives you a clearer picture of a complex time, maybe some of those aha moments, without feeling totally swamped by dates and names.
It's a great example of how religion, politics, and intellectual life just constantly interact and influence each other through history.
So here's something to chew on after this. We talked about all this intellectual dynamism in Dar al-Islam, how it bridged knowledge to East and West later on. Thinking about all those innovations, math, medicine, philosophy, translations, which specific area do you think had the single most lasting, profound impact down the line? And why that one? Something to think about.
A great question for reflection.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.